Hey guys, Rome here, and welcome to the first Q&A. The first question comes from Robert C. Does deep breathing actually detox faster? And if so, why? How does it work? In short, yes, but not in the oversimplified way of just breathing deeper. First, you have to get the biomechanics right. Let me explain. So you breathe, ideally, in multiple zones. You breathe into zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, ideally. Most people, I've measured over 4,000 people, and most people breathe into zones 4 and 5, which stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, which in turn creates a lot more metabolic waste because your body is taking smaller breaths and it might be breathing faster, which is causing anxiety and lots of other things. So a lot of people might be saying that they're breathing deeper, but they just might be breathing into the wrong place. So if you're breathing into zones 4 and 5, well, that's causing a little bit of a problem because that's creating more metabolic waste. Now, if you are breathing properly in zones 1, 2, and 3, what's happening is you are able to expel 70% or more of the metabolic waste from your body. Your lungs are the primary detox mechanism in your whole body. We used to think it was the liver, then we thought it was the skin. Now we know it's the lungs because you're breathing anywhere between 20 and 25,000 times per day. So when you're breathing properly, you're able to control that metabolic waste leaving your body. So first layer, where you breathe, okay? Second layer, how you breathe. So then we go into the Butyeko, we go into all these other different systems of breath. And they all have their own numerous benefits. So learning how to exhale is the most important thing that you can do, first of all, for your whole system in terms of your diaphragm and your breathing muscles that are attached to it, which you have about 11 pounds of on average. And you're able to work that system better when you focus on the exhales. And then if you can develop that system in the deep layers of your core, well, magic starts to happen because you're able to expel a lot more of the metabolic waste. Another thing that happens when you're breathing properly in the proper zones of your body is you're increasing the movement of lymphatics. So like your lymphatic movement is flowing a lot better throughout your body when you're breathing properly, which, as you know, is like the sewage system for a lot of the waste that's moving through the body. So proper breathing is also a pump for the lymphatics. So that's another big benefit in learning how to breathe properly and developing those muscles so that you can go from conscious to unconscious and you can be breathing in your sleep and detoxing in your sleep 24/7. I hope that answers your question, Robert. This one's from Sonia. If someone has breathlessness from asthma, what sort of breath work could they do? She's eating low toxin and is feeling better overall and still gets breathless on action, so has to use inhalers. So I used to have asthma as a kid, and asthma usually stems from overbreathing. There's a lot of studies that are specifically from the Butyeko camp in terms of asthma. But before you get to the Butyeko breathing, something that I would recommend is to teach her how to breathe in the proper places, like I said in the last question, learning how to breathe into zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, because 20% of your alveoli live between zones 4 and 5, right? So 20%. 80% of your alveoli live in your lower lungs. So the oxygen exchange is happening in your lower lungs. So when you learn how to breathe, where to breathe properly, not how to breathe, where to breathe properly, and then the next layer, you learn how to breathe and you can slow down the breath, you can start to get into control of the asthma, essentially. So learning how to breathe slower and decreasing your breaths per minute and also increasing your CO₂ tolerance will be a game changer for this person that's suffering with asthma. I used to use all types of inhalers when I was a kid. I used to have the discus and all the inhalers. And it's been, I don't know, maybe like 20 years now since I've had any asthma attacks. And it just takes retraining. You have to retrain your body to operate more efficiently with the balance of CO₂ and oxygen. So learning where to breathe and then how to breathe the outer layer will be a game changer for any asthmatics. One of the little tricks that this person can use is at the exhale. So let's say you inhale, so hold, exhale, empty, and then pause for about 3 seconds. And then take an inhale again. That'll help to start working the CO₂ tolerance. And CO₂ tolerance is essentially a superpower, because if you've ever done any type of breath holding, your body starts to go into a panicked state as if it's dying, very similar to an asthma attack. Just this is under your control. So if you can control it when you're not having asthma attacks, that'll start to push away a lot of the asthma attacks as well. There's a lot of other things that we can go into specifically for this person, but I'd have to take a look and I'd have to see what's going on to kind of layer it in the proper sequencing. But I would start with where you breathe in your body, where you breathe toxicity-wise too. This goes for everybody, environment-wise, like if you're breathing in toxins, or if you live next to a factory, if you live in a big city, that can influence your asthma attacks as well. Allergic asthma is very common as well. So some things to consider. So where you breathe in your body, where you breathe in the environment, and then how you breathe in terms of CO₂ tolerance can make a big difference in the asthma attacks. So I hope that helps, Sonia. If you have any more questions, you can always ask in the group. Next question from Sperm or Sperm. Not sure if that's your name, but it's a cool name. Can tightness in muscle fascia move around? For instance, if someone has very tight fascia in their upper abs that resolve, can the tightness or stickiness in fascia transfer to another body part? I used to follow a guy who had issues with his pelvic floor who said he resolved it through dynamic stretching through a program called DCT, and he said while he resolved his hip and pelvic floor, an ab fascia problem, he said the tightness traveled to his neck since it had nowhere else to go, and then he started to have neck issues. Yeah, 100%. Fascia is a continuous web. It doesn't segment itself. It doesn't isolate. And realistically, it starts at the edges. So think like your hands, your feet, possibly your head, right? All of those areas. It's a continuous flow. And when your fascia is in a dysfunctional state, if it has adhesions and such, it only has one of two choices. One, the first choice is you know what to do with that fascia on how to release it and get it flowing again, right? That's one. That's the ideal situation. That's not the reality for 99.9% of people though. So what's happening is the fascia, because it has an adhesion somewhere, it could be in your foot, it could be in your ankle. This fascia that's not optimized or in a flowing state, or in a state that is providing support or tensegrity in the system, what it's doing is it's reorganizing the body to adapt to that injury. So even though it might start as an ankle injury or a foot injury or whatever, fill in the blank, it can move to the neck with time because the body, either you adjust the fascia so that the fascia starts to flow, or the fascia adjusts the rest of the body so that it creates compensations so that you can still survive. It's a survival mechanism. But ideally, you would want to open up the fascia and get it flowing and then re-stimulate the fascia in a way where it integrates with the whole system. Again, it can't be done in an isolated fashion if you don't want it to pop up. Kind of like we used to have a game, we used to go to the arcades, we used to play whack-a-mole. So you hit one and then two more pop up somewhere else. And that's kind of like with the approaches to fascia, like if you do it in an isolated way, it can lead to more problems downstream. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, this is the second question from Sperm. Can tight fascia in, say, the scalp transfer tightness to an adjacent body part like the neck? I know fascia is considered one thing rather than a bunch of compartmentalized parts, but from how I feel, there's obvious parts of my body that are tighter than others. Can tightness in one area be pulling on another part, causing loss of range of motion in the adjacent part? Yes. In short, yes. The superficial back line runs from the soles of your feet all the way to your scalp. So tightness in one segment can feel like a rope pulling either down or up because it's a continuous rope. For example, the plantar fascia in the bottom of the foot is the thickest band of fascia inside of the body outside of the IT band. So when this fascia in your foot is, let's say, not in an ideal state, it's going to cause pulling all the way up the line of fascia. So, and most people have that. Why? Well, because we wear modern shoes, we walk on pavement and concrete, and we don't touch the ground. And our toes they look like this, and it does damage. It does damage to the rest of the body. Nothing is ever in an isolated fashion inside of the body. Everything is connected to everything. For example, there's a lot of fascia studies coming out that show that fascia that is dysfunctional can lead to anxiety, depression, even oncological diseases, cancers, through the traumatized fascia tissue. So everything is connected. Fascia is the electrical grid inside of the body, so to speak. And when it has a short somewhere, it can cause a fire somewhere else. So using that analogy, I hope that answers your question. All right, question number 3 from Sperm. Is breathwork the best way and only way to reactivate my dormant TVA? My PT keeps trying to get me to do diaphragmatic breathing to reactivate it, but honestly, it just gets me more paradoxically tight in my abdomen. Like they are reflexively bracing because they don't want to release that way. I started doing dead bugs recently, and honestly, I'm getting that neurological connection back. And notice too that my breaths feel deeper, and not in the superficial sense of breathe in so deeply that your belly expands, which never made sense to me, but in a more, I'm actually breathing deep from all the way down in my balls and butthole deep. That's the only way I could describe it. Anyway, the thing I'm asking is, my PT makes it seem like TVA will never activate properly until I fix my breathing. But it seems like, since doing dead bugs, which works the TVA directly, my breathing is getting fixed. So it's reversed from what he is saying. Have you found this to be true with the people you worked with, that their breathing is stuck, and no matter what breathing exercises you throw at them, they're stuck until they fix the muscle fascia part instead of the breathing fixing the muscle fascia part? In reality, it's a two-way street. So when your nervous system is in a sympathetic state, it tightens your body and it tightens your fascia and it creates more adhesions. When you have adhesions in your body, it puts you more into a sympathetic state. So it's a question of the chicken or the egg. Now, with clients that I see in person or even online, we can do this by themselves or with exercises. One of the things that I like to do is I like to do releases on the diaphragm, like releases on that fascia tissue. Keep in mind, most tightness in the body is just a weakness somewhere. There's some sort of weakness somewhere or some sort of trauma somewhere which is causing that weakness. So yeah, it makes sense that the dead bugs are helping. There's a lot of other things that you can be doing, like releasing fascia in that area, either using your hands or using tools or using all types of stuff. We use all types of stuff in the practice, but focusing on opening up the diaphragm with your hands could be a really big game changer because it'll force you to breathe into your fingers as it's digging deep. When I see people here, I do it for them. It's pretty uncomfortable because my fingers are inside of them, but it's very powerful because in just one session, that can open up their whole transverse abdominis. So Yeah, it definitely makes sense strengthening it, but be mindful. Be mindful that you don't create strength on top of dysfunction. If it's working, keep it working, but be aware of what's going on, because you might pass a threshold where it tightens up a little bit more because you put strength on top of dysfunction. There might be a sweet spot somewhere, like a Goldilocks spot in terms of strength and also creating that flow in that tissue, because that tissue is probably locked up from years of bracing, because that's what we've been taught to do, is to brace. So we have different types of braces. We have emotional braces, psychological braces, we have physical braces from physical trauma, and we carry this. Also cultural bracing too, for women and for men, to keep their abs tight their whole lives, because that's the way it needs to look. And for women to suck their belly in, because that's the way it needs to look. And that creates paradoxical breathing and all types of other clinical issues that show up as like anxiety, sleep problems, depression, blah, 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 blah. Pain in the neck and pain in the lower back and digestive issues. I mean, I can go on for days. Like, this is what I'm really passionate about. But yes, dead bugs can help. Also focus on expanding out laterally the rib cage and digging your hands or some tools into the diaphragm and just like releasing those spots if you feel comfortable doing that, or finding a therapist that can do it for you. And then going back to proper expansion. And also, like, don't think of expanding and properly breathing as belly breathing. That's probably the weakest part of it. Belly breathing is just like a cue, more or less, but think of the expansion of proper diaphragmatic breathing as a 360-degree breath, where you're expanding out your rib cage in a 360-degree plane. So you're breathing into the back, into the sides, into the front, and that requires your ribs to start moving in a way probably that they haven't moved in a while, and to redevelop those muscles again. So hopefully that helps. If you have any more questions, you can always ask in the group, and when I do my next Q&A, I can answer it. All right, this one's from Robbie Davies. Hi, Romza. Currently healing a shoulder from postural sporting issues and an ankle from sporting issues. I think both stem from poor postural engagement issues around my hips. MSG is helping the mind-body connection, and I seem to be untangling myself. Any good exercises you like for hip stretching and strengthening? As with most people these days, I am anteriorly rotated with weak glutes. Okay, so first and foremost, it's what I said in the last question. You want to be really mindful in building strength on top of dysfunction, because now you're going to have really strong dysfunction. Okay, so if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, you want to focus on figuring out how to reverse that, to release the tissues. I like to focus on releasing the tissues, then activating that area. So step one, releasing the tissues through doing different types of fascia work, whether through the micro movement system or through fascia release exercises with tools, or going to a therapist, or very specific fascia stretches for that area. Integrating the spine is very important, like getting the spine moving properly and engaging in a way that is wholesome, essentially. Okay, and then the third one would be like integrating all of those things and getting it into movement. And then the fourth step would be improvising and doing it in your chosen field or activity. Now, here's the caveat there. If you're sitting around all day, that might be a problem. If you're running regularly, that might be a problem. And I see in your picture that you're a runner. So that might be an issue, because it might be compounding the problem. Now you're tuk, 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 and sending those vibrational forces up the chain, right? Ankles, knees, hips, lower back, up the spine, right? So that could eventually create problems. So you might want to, as you're healing this element of your body, you might want to look at your feet, okay? Because your feet might be pulling or creating some sort of adhesions and tension going up the fascia line, so feet, ankles, knees, hips, lower back, right? So it starts at the feet, especially if you're a runner. But if you sit around a lot, it could cause a lot of problems too. I know during COVID, there was a study that came out that said that most people were sitting anywhere between 13 and 15 hours a day. You can't fix that with 20 minutes of stretching. You can't fix that with an hour of running. You have to figure out new ways of living. And I'm not saying that you sit around all day. I don't know what you do all day. I can see in the picture that you run, but I'm guessing that you do a lot of sitting. So if you do a lot of sitting, or if somebody that's listening to this is doing a lot of sitting, you have to figure out new positions in which to sit. So you have to develop a deeper relationship with the floor. Sitting in squats, sitting in cross-legged pose, sitting in fisherman squats, and really like working that element of your life where you touch the floor more often, because in our daily lives, in the modern world, we don't touch the floor enough. We don't touch the floor enough. We stop touching the floor at around the age of 5.5 when we go to school, because then we start sitting in chairs for 8 hours a day or more, and that causes a lot of problems. You know, they used to say sitting is the new smoking. Maybe, but it's definitely a problem. I don't know if it's as bad as smoking, could be worse. I have no clue. I don't know what the long-term ramifications are for everybody, but I can tell you that if you sit around a lot and then you go running, or you do jiu-jitsu, or you do CrossFit, or you go and do bodybuilding exercises, it's going to cause some problems, because now on a daily basis you are creating dysfunction by sitting around all day. It's literally causing a flow of energy, lymph, blood, whatever, to stop in that space. So then it gets trapped there. And then you go and do an intense activity like running or CrossFit or jiu-jitsu, and that's what causes the injury, right? Like it brings the injury to the surface. And most people are like, oh, I got injured doing jiu-jitsu. It's like, no, you probably got injured sitting around 8 to 10 hours a day and then doing jiu-jitsu. That's what people kind of miss. So, okay, going back to what I was saying, lifestyle habits, number one thing. Number two thing, figuring out how to release that tissue, then figuring out how to activate or strengthen that tissue. And that tissue is, there's a lot there. There's your psoas, there's your medial glute, there's the rest of your glutes, there's your rectus femoris, there's your quads. I mean, there's a lot there. There's your IT bands. Like there's a lot there that needs to be released. And then strengthening exercises. I mean, there's a bunch. I would focus on very slow exercises, possibly even in the realm of isometrics, to really strengthen and activate the whole muscle, and figure out afterwards, after you activate each muscle, figure out how to integrate them together, right? That's the work. That's the work. And then you start by going into all the activities that you used to do, and you're a better machine, better human doing those activities. I hope that helps. I hope that helps. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always ask in the comments below. If any of these things spark a different question, yeah, just ask in the comments below, and I'll answer it whenever I do my next Q&A. I hope you guys have a beautiful, beautiful day, week, night, whenever you listen to this. And yeah, if you have feedback, let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao.